you make Talladega the second race of the round instead of the third. And boy, those drivers just seem to lose their minds. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric. Welcome to this week's episode of Out of the Groove. We're officially halfway through the playoffs, guys. I mean, I guess that's both a good thing and a bad thing. The good part is we're that much closer to determining who the champion will be, but obviously the bad part is we're that much closer to the off-season. Those 2.5 wintry months where we have no racing and nothing to talk about. I don't want to go back to football. I don't want to go back to basketball just yet. Oh, I didn't realize what hat I was wearing. But still, if nothing else, race number 5 in the playoffs here at Talladega last weekend really... it shook some things up considerably. I must say, people, most of today's episode is basically just going to be focused on analyzing the current playoff picture, points picture, and whatnot heading into the final race of the round at Kansas. There's not a lot of other news out there this week. I mean, I guess there are a couple of news stories this week that aren't really racing related. Landon Castle had a kid, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. announced that he's going to be having a kid. So... yeah, that's what the people have tuned in to hear about. The rate the series is going, Junior's daughter's probably going to have a ride in the Cup Series by the time she's middle school. But anyway, on to the reason most of you probably tuned in. This last weekend was the race at Talladega, the wild card race, the race where just about anything can happen to anybody. And boy, a lot of stuff happened. I'm pretty sure the race ended with maybe like 8 cars still running. Now, full disclosure, because I'm an honest journalist, I'm not a journalist, I don't know why I say that, but at least because I'm an honest analyst, maybe, I feel like I should say that I did not actually see the race this weekend at Talladega. I had other work commitments. I've done my research, I've seen a lot of the replays and highlights, so I think I have a general idea of what happened, but I just want to let you guys know, I did not actually see the race, so don't hate on me too bad if I don't talk about something you want me to talk about. I'm doing my best, guys. I did see some of the race. I was able to see the final, like, couple restarts, so I did get to see the end, at least, if that means anything. And I guess talking about the ending of the race, Brad Keselowski got the clutch win this weekend. The second time now in his career he's gotten really timely wins at Talladega. He got the win. He is moving on to the round of 8. And that is big because coming into Talladega, he was not in the top 8 in points. He was on the outside looking in, but with his win at Talladega, his ability to avoid all the big ones, all the many big ones, he's leapfrogged his way and he's joined Truex as the only 2 drivers locked in right now. Now, because Talladega was just such a wreckfest, it turned out that stage points in the first 2 stages were really the deciding factor in a lot of points shufflings. A lot of drivers wrecked. Very few playoff drivers finished in the top 10. In fact, I think only 2 or 3 did. Keselowski obviously did well in the stages. So did Ryan Blaney. He won stage number 2, so those were key bonus points for those drivers. Blaney came into Talladega several points behind the cutoff after a not-so-great run at Charlotte. He now leaves with a decent points cushion, actually, over 9th place. So the stage points really made all the difference for Blaney, who was also caught up in a wreck late in the race. As far as events that happened during the race itself, one of the big things that happened early in the race was during green flag pit stops, playoff contender Jamie McMurray, who was my pick to win this weekend at Talladega and has run very well at restrictor plate tracks this season, got caught up in a wreck trying to get to pit road. And it was a wreck that was mostly his fault. He was not in a good spot trying to exit turn 4 and get onto pit road and cut people off, ran into people, got wrecked. He was out of the race very early. McMurray finds himself well below the cutoff heading into Kansas. Jimmy Johnson suffered damage also later on in the race in a similar incident to what happened to McMurray, trying to get to pit road, run into people, not being in a great spot, just a tough situation for Johnson. That, along with the fact that he was caught up in later one of the other big ones, you know, he's also still in the top 8 in points, but he's pretty close to the cutoff now. Those are just a couple real notable events that happened to playoff drivers, at least events that happened to individual playoff drivers. There was a couple big wrecks that caught up a lot of people. The most notable wreck that took out the most drivers, and probably the most playoff drivers as well, happened about 3/4 through the race, in the later half of the race at least. It was a case where heading into turn 3, David Reagan was up there near the front pack. He made an aggressive move to try and move up in front of Martin Truex Jr. They made contact, spun across the entire field heading into turn 3, which is a tough spot on the track to avoid wrecks and often is where a lot of really big wrecks happen. It was an aggressive move that you could probably put blame on both drivers. It's kind of annoying that it was Martin Truex Jr., a guy who's already locked into the next round, that just took out a bunch of playoff contenders. And then of course the fact that David Reagan's not even a playoff driver to begin with, the fact that the 2 of them were responsible for ending a lot of playoff drivers' days, that's gotta not sit great with a lot of those guys. The wreck took out several playoff drivers like Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who came into this weekend kind of in an all-or-nothing mode after winning 2 of the last 3 restrictor plate races. A lot of eyes were on him to make a big gain in points this weekend, and this wreck really ended those hopes. Both Jimmy Johnson, like I said, this was the wreck he was ultimately finished by. Kyle Busch, another driver who, after not having a great run at Charlotte, after getting into the wall multiple times, needed to, survive Talladega. He didn't, so this has hurt him in points and has put him kind of behind the curve heading into Kansas. I'll talk more about that in a second. Matt Kenseth, Kevin Harvick, a couple other playoff drivers that were taken out in this. Matt Kenseth was able to keep his car rolling, was able to, I still think, finish top 15 somewhere, so he didn't get horribly hurt in points. Definitely not helped looking at where he is in the standings. But Kevin Harvick definitely took the bigger hit. Lucky for him, he had a bigger cushion than Kenseth, so he's still, I think, in the top 8 for now, but it's close. Another big wreck that took out some playoff contenders happened a little later in the race. Actually, towards the end, as laps were winding down, we had a few young drivers right up there near the front of the field. Daniel Suarez was leading, Kyle Larson was right there, and so was Chase Elliott. Ultimately, I think with less than 10 laps to go, Suarez ran wide a little bit. Chase Elliott, who was in row 2, started to move through the middle to try and maybe make it 3 wide for the race lead, and that hole closed quickly. Both Suarez and Elliott wrecked. They both wrecked into Kyle Larson, who was on the bottom. So there was 2 other playoff drivers, Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson, who had big damage to their race cars. Like I said, guys, not that many playoff drivers survived. Brad Keselowski obviously did. Denny Hamlin actually did as well, so that was a big boost for that team. But also Ryan Blaney was involved in a wreck, and these wrecks definitely hurt some of these guys in the standings. They don't have quite as big of cushions as they could have had. So anyway, there's not that much more to talk about the race itself. So let's go ahead and look at the point standings. Obviously, we got Truex and Keselowski locked in, so not a lot really to talk about there. Kyle Larson, Kevin Harvick still have pretty decent cushions. Not as good a cushions they had, though, at this point in round number 1. So a wreck or something bad like that happening to them, especially early in the race at Kansas, could still end their chase hopes. Denny Hamlin there had an overall decent day, survived most of the carnage, so he's 21 points ahead. Seems doable for that team. Chase Elliott, you see there, is 20 points ahead. Now, he did well in the stages, so that helped him a little bit, but he could have easily been much further ahead had he not been involved in that late wreck. If Elliott could have snuck in and held onto a top 5 finish like it looked like he was going to, he could be 30-plus points to the good right now and be almost a lock. As is, he still has to be a little careful about what he does at Kansas. Now, Chase Elliott's been really good at the fast tracks, the 1.5 mile, the 2 miles tracks this season. I tend to think he'll be okay, and I think he'll move on, but just pointing that out. After Chase Elliott, we get to what I would call the 4 bubble drivers right now. And as you can see, it's a pretty big bubble, I guess. I mean, Blaney here is +9, Johnson's +7, compared to other rounds, those are pretty decent gaps. I think before the era of stage racing, those would be really big gaps, almost insurmountable for guys like Kenseth and Kyle Busch back there to catch. But with stage racing, with the opportunity for drivers like Kenseth and Kyle Busch to qualify well, maybe get good finishes in those first couple stages, make up some points that way, that 7-9 points isn't that big of a barrier. Jimmy Johnson historically this season has not been very good at collecting stage points. They're a team that they go slow and steady to win the race, so to speak. They aren't too flashy at the beginning of the races, but over time they build it up, and by the end of the race they're good. So they might need to alter that strategy and really focus on getting some stage points, because if Johnson, Blaney are able to beat Kenseth and Kyle Busch early in the stages and even extend those points lead, if they get up by 10-15 points by the end of stage 2, then unless a wreck happens, I think Matt Kenseth and Kyle Busch are going to be out of luck. But while both Jimmy Johnson and Ryan Blaney have not been great at collecting stage points this year, Matt Kenseth and Kyle Busch, especially in recent weeks, have been pretty good at getting stage points. We've seen those Toyotas qualify very well, especially the second half of this season. So when you qualify well, you're typically up front for the first bits of the race, and often that will lead to good stage points. So if you're Adam Stevens, if you're Jason Ratcliffe, the crew chiefs for those two teams, I think you really got to put a lot of effort into qualifying this week. If you can start in the front row, first couple of rows, and get good stage points and hopefully narrow that gap between yourself and Johnson and Blaney, then you'd set yourself up to manage yourself well in the final stage and actually try to beat them on the track, get good finish, get a good overall finish. Not sure what I'm trying to say. I stumbled through that entire bit right there. My point is, right now, when you look at, hey, Jimmy Johnson's +7, Blaney's +9, that's pretty good. They're going to need to have some real troubles if that's going to not work out for them. My point is saying that may not be the case anymore. I think at this day and age with stage racing, 7-9 points, especially when you're a guy like Ryan Blaney, who, all respect to Blaney, he ran well at Talladega. He has not consistently run well at any normal racetrack since the beginning of the season. So in my opinion, while I know Johnson is 7 points and Blaney's 9 points ahead, I think Ryan Blaney's the one that's going to be more on the edge this weekend. Kyle Busch is a guy that can win this race easily. I would not be surprised. Matt Kenseth may not be ready to win this race, but he's a guy that could definitely go out there, get good stage points, and get a top 5. I would not be surprised. Whereas Ryan Blaney, I'm not confident in him doing either of those things I just said. I typically expect Blaney to run 10 to 15th. And if he's run 10 to 15th, and if Matt Kenseth and Kyle Busch are in the top 5, they might get him. So I still think while the points may look a little spaced out right now, especially around the bubble, I think it's still going to be a very interesting, a very tense final battle at Kansas to make it into the round of 8. At least that's what I think. Now I will say, if we go back and look at the race at Kansas back in May, both Ryan Blaney and Kyle Busch finished in the top 5. So obviously that's kind of what we expect from Kyle Busch, but from Ryan Blaney, if he can put together another top 5 run, that will be impressive, and that will probably definitely be enough for him to move on. But the reason I'm still skeptical is because while Blaney, sure, he did run well here earlier this year, that was way back in May. And way back in May, Ryan Blaney and the Wood brothers looked like a real contender. I mean, that's when he was leading laps here and there. He won, obviously, at Pocono to get his first career win. But since then, they have not looked nearly as good as they did during that stretch. So I get it might be the same driver that we saw finish top 5 at Kansas earlier this year. I don't think that's the same race car. So I'm just saying I'm a little hesitant to make Ryan Blaney, and even Jimmy Johnson for that matter, a lock. Kansas, although it's a mile and a half, seems like a pretty straightforward track that we run a lot at in NASCAR. It's been known for having some kind of chaotic finishes, chaotic occurrences, some kind of wild things happen. As mile and a half go, this is one of the more treacherous ones to drive, it appears. I mean, don't forget, guys, this is the race we saw earlier this year where there was a huge crash on a restart and where Aric Almirola hurt his back, and we remember that was a big crash that seemingly came out of nowhere. Kansas is the closest thing to a wild card I think you can get with a mile and a half, so anything can happen, and I think anything, and a lot of things probably will happen. It could get pretty wild, pretty unpredictable, pretty fast. Now, I haven't talked about the two people at the bottom, but I will talk about really quick. It's Jamie McMurray and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And man, what a difference a week makes for Jamie McMurray, huh? It's a shame. Jamie McMurray had looked really great at Charlotte, ran top 5, finished top 5 at Charlotte to actually be inside the top 8 in points at the end of the first race. But man, Talladega, I had high hopes for him. I picked McMurray to win. He'd been good at plate tracks in recent years. He's aggressive at plate tracks, but it seems to usually work to his advantage. I thought he'd do well. He didn't, or he really never got a chance to see how well he was going to do because of that wreck early on. So now he's in a big hole. Both Stenhouse, both McMurray need to win at Kansas, and it's not impossible, especially I don't think for McMurray. I think McMurray has the chance to run top 5 and maybe steal something. But in the case of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. especially, they're going to have to throw out some wild card strategy, pull an Austin Dillon at Charlotte or something if they're going to want to try and move on. And that's unfortunate, but hey, life goes on. I did not pick either of these drivers to move on, so I can't say it's a super big shock to see him at the bottom of the list, but you know, at least in the case of Jamie McMurray, I thought he had a chance. And I guess he still does, because I think McMurray could win. Don't think he will, but I think he could. So lastly, looking at the bubble here, if you want my actual predictions for who's going to be in and who's going to be out, I guess if you want my actual predictions, I wouldn't be shocked. I really would not be shocked to see both Ryan Blaney and Jimmy Johnson miss out. I know you guys think I'm crazy. I picked Jimmy Johnson to be out this round, kind of on a whim, but hey, it's looking like it could be close to true. The thing is, I think both Kyle Busch and Matt Kenseth right now, who are 9th and 10th in points, the first two out, they have consistently been running better than both of the guys right there in front of them. Ryan Blaney, like I said, has not been a top 5 contender in months. Jimmy Johnson really hasn't been a top 5 contender all year, at least not since he won his races at the beginning of the season. While I have confidence in Jimmy Johnson and Chad Knaus as, you know, having experience, Kyle Busch and Matt Kenseth have plenty of experience as well. I think Kyle Busch will get in this weekend. I honestly, spoiler, I think Kyle Busch is going to win the race. I'm picking him to win Kansas. So points may not be an issue for Kyle. I just think he's going to get in on points, or winning the race, I think he's going to get in. But if I'm going to look at who gets out, I guess I'll put Johnson as the first guy out. But then I got to look at Matt Kenseth versus Ryan Blaney. Matt Kenseth has not been as good as Kyle Busch, so while I think Kyle Busch is going to win the race and run top 5, Matt Kenseth I'm a little more iffy on. I think Kenseth will run top 10, maybe top 5, but I don't think he's going to win. Matt Kenseth is 10 points behind Ryan Blaney. Now that might sound like a lot, but like I was saying earlier, with the era of stage racing, when the way stage points are distributed to the top 10, I tend to think by the end of stage 2, Matt Kenseth will have gotten that number down to 4 or 5. And if Matt Kenseth has that number down to 4 or 5 at the end of stage 2, realistically, he just has to finish 4 or 5 positions ahead of Ryan Blaney. And with the fact that Blaney's been running 10 to 15th and Matt Kenseth's been running 5 to 10th, I think Kenseth might get him. So maybe this is just because I like picking the sentimental favorite, or more likely it's because I'm wearing a Matt Kenseth shirt. I think Kenseth makes it in. So yeah, I think you're going to see a total flip-flop between those two right there. I think Matt Kenseth and Kyle Busch will both sneak in. Busch with a win, Kenseth with maybe a 6th place finish. And I think Ryan Blaney will just lose out because it's just not quite fast enough. And I think Jimmy Johnson will just have something go wrong, just won't run as well as them, and will just not get it. I think Johnson will struggle with stage points, and it'll kind of put him on an even playing field for the rest of the race, and I think Kenseth and Busch will just have the edge. That's my prediction, but let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think I'm totally crazy? I think what I'm saying is somewhat possible. I think Kyle Busch winning I think he's going to be tough to beat this weekend. I think he's a man on a mission for sure. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you guys hear what I had to say. I hope you enjoyed it. A new episode will be up next Thursday. I guess it's a little shorter episode than usual. Yeah, no, I can live with a shorter episode. I've been so busy these days. I can live with having less to edit for 1 week. And on that note, Dudley Cup Series Season 8, I know people are constantly asking me when race 9 is, when race 9 is. I thought race 9 was going to be up last Monday, or this previous Monday a few days ago, and obviously that did not happen. I've been so far behind with just school, with work, with Out of the Groove, with all these other commitments. Like this weekend I was shooting something with a bunch of people. I just have not had the time I thought I would have to get to work on that and make it as good as I want it to be. So that's still being worked on. It's actually just right over here. It's like, look, I can literally reach over here and pick up Joey Logano's car. I shouldn't do that though because this is stop motion and they need to be in the same spot frame to frame. But yeah, anyway, my point is it's being worked on. It'll be up hopefully very soon. Maybe I'll have some time this weekend. Maybe I can finish it up then. But it'll be up as soon as I possibly can get it up. So I appreciate all the comments. People asking about it. I'm glad you guys are still thinking about the series. That's great. It'll be up at some point. But anyway, Out of the Groove will be next Thursday as always. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. But yeah, that's all I have. Rambling, all of my personal news, all that type of stuff. You can follow me on Twitter and whatnot down below. You guys, you know the drill. Thanks for watching. Share with your friends, family. If you know other people that like NASCAR, like racing, try to introduce them to the show. Maybe they'll think I'm crazy. Maybe they'll think I look ridiculous. Maybe they'll think I am ridiculous. But maybe they'll like hearing what I have to say because there's not that many NASCAR YouTubers out there. Not that many people doing kind of what I do who just casually talk about racing and what's going on in the racing world, especially not NASCAR related. So I think what we're doing over here is pretty cool, and maybe other people will too. So appreciate y'all doing that. I'll see you guys next week. Hope you have a great weekend and a great week next week. I'll see you then. Goodbye.